Peace. Welcome back to another episode of The Acquired Man. You know, when we think about law enforcement and we think about the police, especially when it comes to black people, it causes a great deal of anxiety. It causes a great deal of anger, a lot of stress, a lot of just uncertainty, never feeling safe within the presence. I know many of times, especially when I started driving as a youngster, every time a police officer got behind me, I was always concerned about whether those lights would come on. So my anxiety would raise. Or just passing by a cop, sometimes just worried about if they would pull out behind me. But we understand that in this country, we have a very serious history when it comes to black people and law enforcement. And this is something that has not changed much or has made very much progress as we constantly search for justice in the judicial system that just seems to never be present and clear. There's always a double standard in America when it comes to policing communities of different ethnicities across America. But when it comes to our reality, not many people even want to consider that what we're saying is the truth. They don't want to consider our traumas. They don't want to consider our pains. They don't understand the grief and sorrow that we feel at the loss of loved ones at the hands of law enforcement, especially when they're unarmed. And we see these things playing out all the time on the TV, all the time on social media, and yet and still we're getting the same result. Not too long ago, in the very near past, Colin Kaepernick, an all-star QB in the NFL, he saw the grueling reality of black people and police brutality in America that began to take place. And he had his own personal stance in which he began to take a knee. And he was heavily criticized for that. But they still failed to understand why he was doing it. Had nothing to do with disrespect of the flag. Had nothing to do with anything of that nature. But we just wanted to see that our people were protected and served as the same. However, what happens when those of us who look like me and you decide to join law enforcement? Now, we know back in the day, black people with us having the trauma that we have, having the history that we have. A lot of times if somebody joined law enforcement, we criticize them, we really ridicule them. We thought they were a sellout. We thought they were an Uncle Tom. We thought they were against the community. But if you really just sit and think about it, it's not really wise and intelligent not to have any type of diversity on any type of institution, especially when it comes to America, which is supposed to be the land of the free and the home of the brave. But when we look at the history of black people in law enforcement, it starts quite early, maybe earlier than many people think. If we were to reflect back in 1867, that was the first African American who was selected to the police department, and this took place in Selma, Alabama. Then 1 year in 1868, we go down to Jackson, Florida. And then into the 1870s, we then go to Galveston and Houston, Texas. Ironically, our guest tonight is from Houston, Texas. And then as time begins to further on, we see that in 1870, tragically and unfortunately, an African-American officer by the name of William Johnson was the first to be recorded to be killed in the line of duty. And then 5 years later, the infamous Bass Reeves was the first U.S. deputy who was appointed as a U.S. Marshal. And then as we continue to make further history, in 1916, if I'm correct, I think it was April 12th. April 12th was the killing, In 1916, Georgia Ann Robinson was the first African-American female appointed to law enforcement in Los Angeles County. And then, as we did make time, blacks in law enforcement, they still felt untreatment. They were unfair. They dealt with racism. They dealt with discrimination. They dealt with a lot of double standards. And so in 1972, which is the year I was born, you had the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement that had to be formed, a committee to make sure that law enforcement officers who look like me and you who are black were treated properly, paid fair wages, and dealt with correctly and with responsibility. So let me run down a few things tonight before I bring on our guest that I want to bring to the table tonight. So to give us clear context of what we're going to be talking about tonight is blacks who are behind the blue. And that is a lot of pressure. A lot of us think we know what they know, and we don't. A lot of us assume that their reality is of a certain way, and I'm here to tell you that tonight's guest is finna clear all the doubt. But let me run down some statistics that came to me. Majority of both black and white Americans say black people are treated less fairly than whites in dealing with the police and the criminal justice system as a whole. Another fact is black adults are about 5 times as likely as whites to say that they've been treated unfairly, stopped by the police because of their race or their ethnicity. Then as we move on to another third fact that we can bring to the table, white Democrats and white Republicans have vastly different views of how black people are treated by police and the wide justice system as a whole. Nearly 2/3 of black adults, 65%, say they've been in situations where people acted as if they were suspicious because of their race, while only a quarter of white adults say that that's happened to them. Let's move on to a fifth. Black Americans are far less likely than whites to give the police high marks for the way that they do their job. Excuse me. Let's move on to another fact. In the past, police officers and the general public have tended to view fatal encounters between black and people very differently, and that comes without really much mystery. Around 2/3 of police officers, 68%, said in 2016 that the demonstrations over the death of black people during encounters with law enforcement were motivated to a great extent by anti-police bias. Let's move on to another fact. A majority of officers said in 2016 that the relations between police and the department and black people in the community they served were excellent, 8%, or good at 47%. And number 9, an overwhelming majority of police officers, 86%, said in 2016 that high-profile fatal encounters between black people and police officers have made their job harder. Which brings us to the final point. White police officers and their black colleagues have starkly different views on fundamental questions regarding blacks in American society. Which brings us to our guest tonight, Brother Andre L. Barfield, who is a great friend of mine that I've known on the softball circuit for some years now. Before I really understood that he was in law enforcement, we would have great conversations until he made it known that he was in law enforcement, and to a very great extent, and to a very great degree. Now, there was a lot of questions that I would ask him because I myself had took a little interest in joining law enforcement. I went through my little run here in Atlanta, Georgia, and what I've experienced just right out the gate, just even going through the PT and the whole session, the training session and the background check was enough for me to check out and say, you know what, I'm good upon this. But in having further conversations with him, he really opened my eyes to some very dark realities, dealing with things with PTSD, always being in the line of danger, seeing some of the most gruesome scenes that could be haunting in your lonesome moments and your wee hours of the night when you're thinking about your job and your duty and career. However, he's also an activist brother who cares about the community and wants to see things done the right way. I'm not gonna waste any more time, man. Let me go ahead and bring our guest on, man, so we can get this conversation started for tonight. What's going on with you, brother?
Hey, what's up, man? What's good?
Hey, man,
I see you
I'm
put your
honored to have
costume
you
on.
on.
You got your costume on. I see.
Yeah, you know, I had to get my costume on. I got to get
Yeah,
my budget up so I can give me a glitter
yeah.
glove like Michael Jackson.
You got the Malcolm X glasses and everything, man. You represent. I see.
Yeah, they make me feel more scholarly. So, man, it's good to have you on the show, man. You know, this is something we talked about almost 2 years ago when I first started podcasting. You were one of the first people that came to mind that I just knew I had to have you on this show. I think the discussion that we have tonight is one that we don't have enough in the community. I think it's a discussion that we don't have very often to give people the understanding of when you are black in law enforcement, the things that you deal with and the things that impact your life and affect your mental health and also your physical health as well. But before we get into the spiel tonight, man, you know, let's get a little bit on the sports side of things, man. Now I see that you back out playing ball again this year, man. Who you playing with this year on the circuit, man?
I haven't changed, man. It's like I've been playing senior ball with Mississippi Blues since I've been on the circuit since like 2016, playing senior ball.
Yeah.
I haven't changed. I just haven't made it in tournaments this year because of some other things going on in my personal life as well as just softball life in general. You know, I'm an older man now, so it's like I have to stay a little closer to home than I used to sometimes.
Man, you age well, man. You know, man, one time I think I've only pitched against you a few times, brother. You are hard out, man. You are a very hard out, bro.
Yeah, you know,
I see you constantly taking BP.
Game day is rest day, bro. Game day is rest day.
I know that's right. Yeah. So, man, I was watching something the other day on Prime Video, man. I watched this documentary called The League that was talking about the Negro Leagues, man. And I thought you were the first. I promise you, I'm not just saying this because you're on the show. You're the first person I thought about because when I talk baseball, we talk history. I know you are one of the few people besides Mike Tillery I know that know their stuff, man. How did the Negro Leagues and the history that you have affect you? Because I do believe that you have a few relatives that also played in MLB. How did that affect you as an athlete coming up through the game of baseball?
I mean, for me, I'm from a different, time period. I'm in my 60th year of life here. So I was born in 64. I grew up in the 60s and in the 70s and the early 80s. So during the time when I was growing up, everything wasn't you couldn't Google anything. So it's like basically you had to learn things and entertain yourself through reading and books and study and stuff like that. And like we were required to go to the library when I was in elementary school and stuff like that. So I used to always check out books that talked about sports and baseball and Negro leagues, and that's where I got like most of my basic information about it from. In addition to that, I don't know if you old enough to remember, but there was a time where salesmen used to actually go to your house and try to sell you things like encyclopedias. And so
Yes, yes, yes.
we always had a current set of encyclopedias, and I used to would order all like these trading cards that would give backgrounds on black players and stuff like that. Because during the time when I grew up, there was a substantial amount of black players in baseball. So that's basically, where I got my love for the game from, as well as the fact my father played. I had some other relatives that was playing at the time.
Man, that's what's up, man. And you have my condolences, man, on the recent passing. I follow you and everything the content that you put on Facebook, man. And I understand where a lot of the content comes from, man. Me and you've talked in private a lot of times, man. So, man, you're a person that I highly respect, man, and just and I care a lot about you like a brother, man. So, I know you fighting a lot of battles, but I admire your strength, man, because you damn sure don't wear what you look like and what you're going through, man. Leading into law enforcement. When did the idea of when did the first idea come in your mind to want to be involved in law enforcement?
Okay, so from the way of background, when I was growing up, what you had in your visual at that time on television, everything was either a comedy, a cop show, or a Western. That's all that was on television when I was growing up. So I was kind of like an introverted child. I spent a lot of time to myself reading and watching TV and stuff like that. So that's all I would do. That's all I would see. I actually, and a lot of people find this funny when I tell them this, but I actually grew up wanting to be the Lone Ranger. Wanting to be the Lone Ranger. Okay, the guy with the mask that riding around on the white horse and the Indian friend, fighting for truth, justice, and the American way. Plus, everything else was a cop show. So I was always inundated with cop shows and stuff like that. So, and growing up in the area I grew up with in Houston, you see things and you come across things like the area I grew up in Houston, I believe is like that. The last time I checked statistics was number in the top 15 in crime rate in the country. The area I grew up in Houston. So growing up, you kind of had a sense that you wanted to do something to make it better in the neighborhood. And I always had that altruistic spirit where I always just wanted to reach out and help people. And interestingly, earlier you spoke about Bass Reeves, the first black deputy U.S. Marshal. The Lone Ranger is actually based on the life of Bass Reeves.
Really?
Yeah, the true story. The picture what you see on television, the white man with the mask and everything. No, it's actually based on Bass Reeves, the black man, and the black mask actually symbolizes his black skin. So that's why they did that.
Wow, boy, that's some good history right there, man.
Yeah. So being around that, growing up, I can say for honestly that when I went into law enforcement, there was within 4 blocks of where I grew up, there's probably 10 to 15 guys in law enforcement.
10
that I came up with. 10 to 15 black guys. I was in an all black neighborhood, and it's like 10 to 15 of us were in law enforcement in some capacity, state, local, or federal. And we have all stayed close and worked together over the years.
So I gotta ask you this too, man. I a couple times to become a police officer, did the background check, and went and did the PT, and they got to talking about all this stuff we was gonna do in the academy, and I'm like, I think I can get with that, man. Learning how to shoot, drive courses, but that tasing was something I ain't with, bro. And I feel a lot of people going through that. Yeah. So, but when you came up, the taser wasn't even. Was a taser around when you first went to the academy?
Well, no. Actually, we didn't have that type of deterrent. Let's say when I came in, it was more about impact weapons, batons, things of that nature. Within the federal government where I worked, we didn't use like impact weapons and stuff like that because we felt like it was too aggressive. So we used what we call pepper spray.
Okay.
So we stayed away. We considered whether we would use impact weapons or tasers when we first went into our use of force program, because I was a tactical instructor for like 25 years of my career. So we actually considered using either impact weapons, batons, or tasers. and we met in the middle, and we said we were going to use the least intrusive, and we were going to use pepper spray. So that's what we used. But I
As you,
had to actually
I'm
be
sorry.
pepper sprayed. I had to be pepper sprayed, not tasered. So
I seen that. I seen that too, man. I seen this chick, this Spanish chick in San Diego. I used to watch all this stuff about the police academy on YouTube to kind of get myself psychologically, and I'm like, man, they getting sprayed and spitting up and choking. I'm like, man, they gonna make sure you tough.
I've been sprayed. I've
As
been
you be,
sprayed twice. It ain't fun, bro. It is not fun. You know the way of the thinking is that in order for you to employ the technique, then you need to understand what your subject is feeling so that you can better take care of them in that circumstance. So we had to actually go
understood,
through before we become a tactical instructor. You had to be sprayed. So
understood. So as you progress in your career, man,
mm-hmm.
what were some of the expectations that were not met, or something that you began to notice early in your career that you didn't see this coming, or you didn't sign up for this, or this was something that was kind of disturbing to you?
See, the thing is that over time, everything kind of changes. In the beginning, when I came up, when I started in law enforcement, it was about protect and serve. It was about cleaning up the communities. It was about, in my mind, I walked in with this idea that I was going to come in and be this champion of justice, and I was going to help get drugs out of my neighborhood, get crime out of my neighborhood, and be a inspiration to the kids growing up and stuff like that. And I experienced a lot of that early in my career. And then things changed, and then
Speak on
things
it.
evolved. Okay, so up until probably mid to late 90s, I always felt empowered and proud to be in law enforcement. You know what I'm saying? I'm not even talking not as a black man. I'm talking about just to be in law enforcement, period. I was doing something. I would visit my old neighborhood, drive through the neighborhood, get out. All the kids want to come up. They want to talk to you. They want to speak to you. They want to hang out with you. And I felt like that I was portraying a positive image to the community that I came from. And then at the time, right about the time Obama came into office, everything changed, bro. I'm telling you, everything changed. It seems like the mindset of half of our country changed from police officers are our saviors to police officers are the enemy. And this is, this occurred with when Trayvon Martin occurred, and then when Mike Brown occurred, and when Tamir Rice, when all of these Philando Castillo, all these things started occurring where all these unarmed black people started being killed by police, and it just didn't seem justified. And then there was no justice on the back end of it. The perception of law enforcement changed dramatically. Now, within the black community itself, there has always been a tense relationship between law enforcement and the black community for things that we did not see. Now, at the time when smartphones and all these other devices came into play and things started being recorded and we started seeing these things live, then, that perception just grew exponentially within the community. So that was
That's a
part of
great
it.
point. I never even thought about it. So, for your personal experience, man, what was some of the things that was hard to deal with in the comments that people would say about you being on the force? Because I know you didn't work some really high risk communities. What were some of the things that used to bother you about our own people who criticized you for being on the force?
I mean, what I saw because of the area I worked in. I worked organized crime, drug trafficking, which I did with a lot of cartels. I did with a lot of community stuff. I did some white collar stuff. I did some white collar stuff. It would be mostly white people. You know what I'm saying? It would be bankers, lawyers, judges, people on the take, stuff like that. Even law enforcement officers who were
Wow.
crooked and stuff like that. Sex trafficking would always be different races. It would be Hispanic. It would be Asians. It would be blacks. It would be some of everything. Drug trafficking would be Hispanics and blacks. Almost exclusively, it was Hispanics and blacks. Even though there was a segment of it that definitely involved whites, it seems like the face of those particular types of crimes, drug trafficking, sex trafficking, was always minorities. So from that standpoint, you became more the enemy of the community, even though you were trying to police the community. What I always saw is that we were always focusing on people who look like me. So when I show up, when I'm kicking the door in to do a search warrant or do an arrest warrant, or I'm out driving around, following people around, trying to gather evidence so we can take these people off the street, it's me following my people. See what I'm saying? So it's like when you live in a community where you have those type of people still functioning within the community, all of a sudden is, oh, he's a sellout. He's the cop. Oh, he just be careful what you say around him. Be careful what you do around him. I mean, people that I grew up with, who was close to and friends with, family members and stuff like that. You know, I'm not unaware that I have friends, family, close associates, and and relatives and stuff who are involved in some bad stuff. So all of a sudden, I'm not just the enemy within the community itself. I'm also the enemy within my friendship circles, within softball circles, within
Wow.
family circles. It's like people all of a sudden they're like, ostracizing me and putting me off to the side. Say, hey, you can't talk around him. You can't do this around him. You can't say this around him. He gonna take your information and turn you into them people. So I deal with a lot of that over the years.
So I remember about maybe 5 years ago, there was a judge here in Atlanta. It was a black man. This made the news, and he had a moment where he broke down in the court where he just pretty much said, you know what? And he started talking to the young black men. He's like, listen, I'm tired of seeing y'all come across my podium. I'm tired of sending y'all away
Mm-hmm.
for 10 to 15 years. I'm tired of y'all making the wrong decisions where I have to sentence you and you look
Mm-hmm.
like me. Did you ever have a breaking point in your lonely time, your personal space? Or was there ever a time where you just had to break down and tell some of the young men in the community, like, yo, when are y'all going to wake up and understand you can't win this battle? When are y'all going to wake up and make better decisions? Did you ever have that breakdown or that
Yeah,
breaking point?
I've mentored many of the young men who grew up in the neighborhood and came up behind me, and some of them didn't make it alive. Some of them who I was very close to, and I would constantly tell them, "Hey, I don't want to see you become a folder coming across my desk, or I don't want to have to be the one to go to your mom and say, hey, he was shot last night in the middle of a drug deal or something like that." And but it happened. It happened all the time. So it's very traumatic experiences when it's different when you're working cases on people who you have no connection to, and when you come across people who you actually grew up with in areas that you actually know very well. Like I've sit in a lot of rooms where we were doing briefings for a search warrant or for operations, and they send out the list of targets, and it's a who's list of guys I went to junior high school with.
Wow. That's
And
crazy.
you sit there and you're like, man, it's like, man, I know these people. What do you do? And you go out there and you kick a door in, and you're not expecting that the person on the other side of the door is the son of your mama's best friend from church or something like that. See, that happens,
So
especially when
before I
you're
get to the
working in
next
that area.
question, I just thought about something. So I once heard years ago, man, that when in the academy, they do a certain type of psychological training to where when you deal with different ethnic communities, you handle them certainly. And a police officer told me some years ago that when it comes to black people, they are taught in the academy to be completely desensitized and do not look at black people as human subjects. And you can deal with white people a little bit more peaceful, a little less aggressive, but blacks and browns were somebody that you were supposed to deal with exclusively in a very aggressive manner and always be prepared for an attack. Is that true?
I would disagree with that. That's not particularly taught within the framework of the training for law enforcement officers, and that would be more probably prevalent, if at all, within state and local. Within the Fed, where I come from, you are basically taught to follow the procedures, follow the program. It doesn't matter who the person is on the other side. Ultimately, what would happen is that you would see that a lot of the people you work in the cases with would look like you in particular areas, but they don't actually teach you to look at a community a certain way. Now, what happens is your personal biases, your upbringing, the things that you associate yourself with, the stuff that you read, the things that you watch on TV, the type of political ideology you have, that enters into how you perceive the people who you are servicing, let's say, or supposed to be serving.
Was there ever a point in your career? Was there ever that day, and you retired 30 years, so I'm assuming this had to happen because you're constantly in the line of danger. Was there ever a day that you can recall where you felt like your life was definitely right there on the line? Today was the day, and you was just in a bad situation. Was you ever in that position to feel like you were about to die or be killed?
Oh yeah, I was in that position all the time, and it's like it's when you're working the types of cases that I was working. I dealt almost exclusively for most of my career with cartels and street traffickers and stuff like that. Anytime you go through the door, every time, it doesn't matter how simple it was, it didn't matter what the situation was, and there were times when I was more at risk for doing something white collar where you wouldn't think it was a violent crime. I was more at risk for doing that than I would be for the street crime sometimes. You'd be
How
surprised
so?
that the street, because white collar criminals can't fathom going to jail or losing because they're so used to getting their way. They're so privileged in the way that they go through the judicial system. So they don't ever think that they're going to actually have to pay a cost for what they do wrong. Street criminals, it's kind of the cost of business. You know that you're doing dirt, and you know that at some point the cops will probably come knocking at your door. And so they aren't necessarily violent to that extent. They're violent with each other within the realms of dealing with other organizations, other criminal organizations, stuff like that. But like toward law enforcement, they're not necessarily violent when we show up. They kind of like, okay, you got me. Let's go to the next.
So
So,
it's not like
but
what we watch on TV.
nah, I mean, TV. I mean, there's some of that. I mean, no doubt, there's some of that. No doubt, TV. A lot of times, TV is based on actual cases, and they embellish it for dramatic effect. But I can tell you that anytime I've gone through a door, I had that sense that when I went through, hey, I've had shots fired on the other side of the door. I've had circumstances where we go in, because you're going in, a lot of times you're going in either the middle of the night or you're going in early in the morning, and you catch people when they're sleeping and not expecting you to come. And you tell me, if you laying in your bed at 4 o'clock in the morning, somebody kicked the door in, you're gonna think it's the cops, or you're gonna think it's somebody trying to get you, and you're gonna grab something and start, retaliate. That happens a lot. That's why a lot of these situations that you see on TV where these cops go in on these circumstances and they end up shooting the people on the inside, and then it ends up those people weren't the crooks or whatever. It all comes down to when you're doing that paperwork for those operations, and that's why they scrutinize those that paperwork so tough, is because if those I's aren't dotted and those T's aren't crossed, then you're gonna be in the wrong when you go through that door if you got the wrong person. Because there's something that we call justifiable force, and then there's something that we call, oh, you just overreacted because of whatever.
Have you ever witnessed a colleague being killed in the act of performing or carrying out an arrest?
I have not. I have never seen
Really?
and I've never seen an actual, and I've worked task forces with state, local, and federal officers. I've never had a circumstance where one of us did not go home safely.
Out of your
I've
30-year
seen
career,
I've seen circumstances where the other side didn't go home, but
yeah, that's tough.
yeah.
The next question I'm gonna ask you, you don't have to answer this question. This is solely on you. Out of your 30-year career, what is the one day or the one event that you can recall that traumatized you or damaged you witnessing it?
I mean, the one thing that sticks with me now, and it gives me pause when I talk about it, when I think about it, two things. And I'll say two things. The one thing is that personally, I was working on a case, and we were taking down this organization. There was like 160 something targets in the investigation, and we had an individual who was cooperating with us and giving information. He was going to testify against the bad guys. We took him down, so he became, y'all like to call him snitch. We call him informants,
Mm-hmm.
But he's telling us what's going on. And he did his jail time, and he came out, and before he was supposed to testify for us, he was called to meet with one of the persons who he had been working with previously. And he showed up, and it was a trap. You're gonna take him out. So he chose, and he's supposed to tell us when he was going to do stuff like that, when he was going to meet with them, so we could provide some type of protection or whatever. And he chose, for whatever reason, he chose this time to go on his own. But not only did he choose to go out there on his own, he went out there with his 4-year-old daughter. Okay, so he goes out there with his 4-year-old daughter to meet with these folks, and it's an ambush. So basically, they riddle that vehicle with all type of gunfire. We get the call, middle of the night. We show up on the scene, and what I see is I see him. He's all shot up, but I also see his 4-year-old daughter in the passenger seat with most of her brains blown out. That's probably the most traumatic thing I ever saw. And beyond that, we had to take the photos and the crime scene stuff. And then when we went to trial on these people, we used those photographs at trial. So not only did you witness it at that time, the after effect, but then you had to take that same image, blow it up, and present it in a form where you're supposed to sit there and desensitize yourself to any emotion and show this to other people who have no idea that any of these things actually happen in real life. And you got to sit there and basically say, this is why this person should go to jail, because this is the kind of stuff they do. So, I mean, I dealt with that. The other thing I would say is that when I was a supervisor, I was acting assistant chief for probably about almost 3 years. And as part of my duties, Houston was like the hub for transportation of drugs coming up from Mexico. So as part of a after action group, I would be responsible for looking at the after action reports for all the violence that was occurring in Mexico and stuff like that. So I would get these after action reports every day. So I would spend part of my day every day looking at these reports where it would be nothing but the photographs of murders and people decapitated and people shot up. So I'm just basically looking at all this death and destruction like every single day. That was my job, to do that. And so I got to keep it together. I got to take what I'm doing during the day, and then I got to turn around and I got to go home and I got to deal with people in the real world. Softball people, playing ball, relationships I was in, marriages that I was in. I'd have to go home and like turn that part of me off so I could go home now and try to function as a viable part of, like, you know, the regular world. So as mentally, it was just it's kind of tough. It's kind of draining. It does leave you with a lot of sleepless nights, and I still have a lot of sleepless nights, a lot of nightmares, a lot of stuff that trigger you, that you see something on television and be like, whoa, 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 why am I feeling like this? There are a lot of days where the images that I have seen, I'm like in a state of just like anxiety, like nervousness. And I can't understand why I feel that way, because there's nothing going on why I should feel that way, but I do anyway. And I've just kind of like over time, I've just learned like some techniques to kind of deal with it and just push it, keep on pushing. Softball was always number one for me though. I'd go out, hit the ball, play some ball, hit the ball off the tee, whatever I could do, go work out, whatever I could do to just kind of physically release whatever tension I was feeling in my head.
Man, that's a lot. Oh, wow.
It's a lot to unpack. I'll put it to you like that. It's a lot to unpack.
The home life, marriages, relationships. How would your job and the things that you experience? What kind of person did it make you? Even when you try to bombard and turn it off, I'm pretty sure there were times where it just like you just had those moments. How does that affect marriages and relationships?
Yeah, I can tell you this because I've done the work. I've done, you know, the required therapies that we were supposed to have as law enforcement officers when things would occur, or just to be assessed annually to figure out where you were, to make sure you were not there finna, you know, explode, go crazy, and shoot up the office or something like that. But I can tell you that within law enforcement, the divorce rate is probably highest in law enforcement. Law enforcement officers are probably more prone to alcohol abuse, drug use, domestic violence. It's a very high degree because they're dealing with so many things in their day life that it's hard to turn it off when you come home. It's a lot like, you know how they talk about in sports, like football players, they're so violent, they're out there trying to tackle each other, hit each other, and then they come home and
Yeah,
they're told you gotta turn that aggression off.
yeah.
And it does become difficult when you are dealing with those, and every day is different. Some days, a lot of days, I might be sitting in my desk, you know, looking at bank records, trying to figure out where the drug money was going. You know what I'm saying? So those were days where it's like it wasn't quite as stressful. But then there were other days when, yeah, I just got through kicking a door in, arresting some people or being shot at. And then I got to come home and deal with a person, a woman, a wife, a girlfriend who then had a bad day. You know what I'm saying? Then had a bad day, or concerned about something that's going on her side of the equation, and you come through the door and it's like you just get all this stuff dumped on you right then, when the only thing you really want to do is walk in the door and be like, hey, can I just chill for a second before we get into all these things you want me to do around the house, and all these things you want to do, all these trips you want to take, all this stuff you want me to pay for, all these stuff on your side of the equation that you need done from me. Because a lot of it is you trying to balance having all these different types of responsibilities. You got responsibilities at home, you got responsibilities at work, and then in the middle, there's this person who's trying to figure out, like, damn, where do I fit in all this? Who is recognized? And when you're the type of person, you're a high performer, because a lot of people who are high performers are that way to disguise the fact that they're traumatized. So
That's
when you are the type
interesting.
of when you're the type of person who is considered to be a strong person, the person who everybody comes to, when they need things done, like at work, if you're the supervisor, if you're the go-to person when people need help with writing or cases, or or something personal they have going on in their life, or something personal they have going on the job, people wanting to be promoted. Like, as a supervisor, I spent a lot of time with people sitting across the chair from me telling me about all these things going on in their personal life. I'm having trouble with my wife, or I'm going through a divorce, or my kids are this, or I'm divorced and my ex won't let me have the kids. She wants to raise up my child support. I can't afford it. I'm feeling depressed because she doesn't love me anymore. I would sit up and listen to people tell me all these stories as a supervisor, or even just as a friend on the job. And at the same time, while I'm trying to compartmentalize the fact that I'm trying to deal with my own shit, you know what I'm saying? Like, some of the similar stuff, I'm also having to take on all these burdens of all this other stuff that's going on with other people. And so the difficulty is, you're always looking for a place of solitude and a place of peace, and there is none. And there absolutely is none. And so
Really?
there is no place. I'm telling you, there is no place of peace for a person who has it coming at them from all different ways. What you find is, you find coping mechanisms for how you deal with it. But there is no place of peace. It's always there. It's always there. It's always here. It's always there. But you find coping mechanisms so that it doesn't manifest itself as something violent or something angry or something toxic. Especially when you're talking about relationships, you are trying so hard not to be triggered by what the other person does, so that you don't become some version of yourself that you don't want to exist.
So what would you suggest for people who are married to law enforcement? What's the number one or two or three things that you, from your experience and what you know, what is something that they can do that when they walk through the door that can kind of quell some of the stress and ease their mind? Like, could they run like a hot bath, hot tub of bath water, food
Uh, you
cooked, a
know,
massage?
those things are all good, but a lot of times it comes down to two things: communication and understanding, and the ability not to be self-absorbed. Let's say, to not be with a person who has so many demands on you that they want you to do so many things for them that they don't understand that you have needs to, especially when you're dealing with somebody in a job like, and I won't just say law enforcement, people in the medical profession, people who are first responders. Those people have high stress jobs where they are dealing with stuff that no one else can imagine. So when they are dealing with, and that's why what you find is, you find a lot of those people end up dating or marrying people in that same area, because you feel like that person is going to understand. That's why so many relationships come out of people who are in the military. Those stressful situations bring you together because you have a common occurrence of thought, basically.
I never thought about that. So let me ask you this, because I'm finna go deeper into the spiel.
Let's go. Let's
Have
go.
you
Let's
ever
do it.
been targeted? Have you ever been targeted and knew you were targeted by maybe the cartels, a street gang, people that are familiar with?
Uh,
Uh,
yeah, yeah. I can give you a perfect example. I was working on a case, a very large drug case, and we took down. There was this set of 10 brothers, two sets of brothers, 5 and 5, two sets of brothers. Okay, they were
damn.
basically the major suppliers of the narcotic that they were supplying. I ain't gonna say what kind. The major suppliers of the narcotic they were supplying from. They were directly next to the Mexican supplier. They were in the valley, and they got the drugs from the Mexican supplier, and then they shipped it all over the country from there. Those 5 brothers. I mean, those 10 brothers. So we took them all down. The main guy came up with a plan. Once he got arrested, he was housed with an individual who was doing life, and he had, you know, when you're arrested, you get privy to all your documents, all the search warrants, all the arrest warrants, all the reports. You get all that through your lawyer, basically. So
I didn't know that.
yeah. So as he, you know, he's sitting there in his cell waiting on trial, trying to figure out, you know, how he can best serve himself as far as his case goes. He's going through all the documents and he's talking to his lawyer and he's, you know, he's telling his lawyer and he's telling this guy that he's in jail with, who's doing life for his drug crimes. He said, yeah, it's like, I know who this person is. Cause you know, we would identify people in our reports as informant number one, informant number two, you know, like that. And he said, oh, I know who this person is. I know who this person is. I know who this person is. And he was asking this guy to help him orchestrate murders of not only the cooperating people, but also the judge, prosecutor, and the agents if it came to that. And he was offering this individual basically for every person that we hurt or take out, $50,000 per. And this individual took offense to the fact that this guy who's just coming in, he thought he was like the top dog in the prison, and this guy's trying to make me work for him and get me to get other people killed. So, and they were separated at some point, and the guy started writing them letters to that effect, trying to see when they can get everything going. So what happened was the person who he was trying to get to orchestrate the murders decided he was going to come to us and tell us about it. He doing life. So he decided he was going to leverage this new information and get himself a deal and get himself out early. So he came to us with the letters from the crook, spelling out the whole plan and everything. And he had an attorney, and we sit down. We talked to that guy probably for about a month. We've talked to him like every day for probably a month, where we laid out how we were gonna, deal with this situation. But yeah, he was trying to get us all knocked out for like $50 per.
Wow.
And
That's
yeah,
not
and
funny, but I mean, it's a real serious
at the
world.
time is it, and I can tell you this: I have had situations in my career where personal life, I'd be at the mall, and some guy I done worked the case again or sent to jail 10 years before that. He walking around at the mall. Hey, you don't remember me, do you? Just walk up on you. I've had situations where there was some guys in softball who did that. And
You have
it's been
every
an
right to,
interesting ride.
but in that moment, you have every right to kill.
Yeah, you know what? It's you don't, you're armed. At the time when I was working all the time, I was armed all the time. But you ain't got a gun on you when you're playing softball, bro. and I've always been kind of the advocate that, when you at the ballpark, man, the last thing I want to have is like my gun in my bat bag or something like that. I don't want that to happen. Because
Yeah.
the way my PTSD and my temper set up, you say the wrong word to me, bro, or you threaten me the right way, it might be go time. So for me, it's like I always try to put myself in positions. And if you'll notice, and you said this about me before, but if you'll notice, you will always see me pretty much isolated in crowds. You see me at the park, and you'll see me off to the side somewhere, not up under other people, not engaging other people. And a lot of that is because that's how I manage my mental health when it comes to some of the things that I've done and I've gone through, is that I realize that at any given moment, I could be triggered and turn into that dude. You know what I'm saying? So in order to avoid that, my coping mechanism is to just keep to myself so that I don't have to be involved in all these little situations with people and their drama and stuff like that. Because my experience is, because I've dealt with so much trauma and so much internalized, pain and stuff, that I don't want to just react one day because I'm having that moment, that PTSD moment. You know what I'm saying? So I just kind of like take the high road. The path of least resistance is what I call it.
So let's get to the thick.
Mm-hmm.
So you're in your career, you're
Mm-hmm.
sworn to uphold the law and protect the
Mm-hmm.
community.
Mm-hmm.
But now we're gonna deal with the bigger elephant in the room. When did you realize? Did you ever anticipate that there was racism? You were gonna face racism, discrimination behind the badge. And at what point did it really just become so blatant? What did you begin to recognize being on the force as a black law enforcement officer, that there was truly a double standard when it comes to white
Um,
officers and black officers?
Um, I'm different in that I see everything through the lens of I never underestimate the role that race plays in everything in our society. I grew up the son of sharecroppers. My grandparents were sharecroppers. My parents were sharecroppers. I grew up I was born in the year where the Civil Rights Act was written. The Voting Rights Act was the next year. So I've seen segregation, desegregation. I've seen racism that you would not believe. I've seen Klan marching down the street. I grew up in a home where in the open field across the street, the Klan used to hold their meetings and have the big cross burning in the middle of the field. So I've seen all of that. But as far as law enforcement goes, day one for me, I knew I was different. And I'll tell you why. My first day on the job, first day, I walk into my first meeting with my new manager, my new work group, my training group, the people who are going to be in the group with me. I'm 22 years old, fresh out of college. I had a unique situation in that most of the people who came on were older. We had like maybe 2 or 3 people who were fresh out of college, but everybody else was older, like early mid 30s. So I walk in the room first day. I started my career in Austin, Texas. I was the only black male agent in the field office, the whole Austin field office. Now, the Austin field office in Texas, everything outside of Dallas and Houston is the Austin field office. The whole state is the Austin field office.
Damn.
I was the only black agent, whole
Go
field office.
Spurs.
Yep. Only one, but I was in Austin. All right. So I walk in day one. Manager walks up to me, goes, "Hey, how you doing? I bet you're Andre Barfield." And I'm like, 22. So I'm like, how does this guy know who I am? Does he have a folder with my picture in it or something like that? Once everybody else arrived, I'm the only black person in the room. So how do you guess he knew who I was? Because when I walked in as the only black face, he knew it had to be me. So that was my first experience, day one on the job. And so that had an effect on me right then because I was like, whoa, this is going to be different. I grew up in Houston, fourth largest city in the country. I grew up in the hood, so I was around black people all the time. I went to all black schools up until the point where when I went to high school, I was in a magnet school program where I was at a school that was 99% black in a program that was 98% white. So it's like so other than that, I walked into this environment. I was like, oh wow, that's like I thought I had gotten away from that. And here I am in the real world now. It's like, oh man, it's about to get real. So as a law enforcement officer, there are things that you have to figure out early on that you have three things. You have the pressure of being in law enforcement. You have the pressure of being black and being in law enforcement. And then you have the pressure of how you are perceived as being black in law enforcement by whites and by blacks.
By
So it's
blacks.
threefold. By blacks as well. Because once again, black people see you when you're in law enforcement differently because of their experiences with law enforcement.
Okay, I'm thinking. I
White,
thought you was talking about within the department.
yeah, I mean within the department as well, because there's not as many, and the majority of the black people when I first came, like for example, by the time I got to the Houston field office, our little segment of agents was like 100. Let's just say, for example, 100 agents, right? There were only 17 blacks, 17 black agents out of 100. And in Houston, that was a lot because across the country, it might be one or two in every little office. So we were isolated to a certain degree as well. So there was the pressure of not only being black, not only being perceived to be in law enforcement a certain way, not only perceived to be black in law enforcement, but also lacking a support system within that dynamic. Because within every law enforcement segment or office or organization, there is a segment of whites who are KKK, white supremacists, Republican nationalists, don't like black people, don't like anybody who isn't white. They see black people different than they see themselves. So in every organization, if you don't have a support system, and it don't necessarily have to be black people, but if you don't have the support system in place as a black person coming into those environments, you're going to struggle, because what you're not going to get is you're not going to get mentorship. You're not going to get promotions. You're going to have to work twice as hard. Your work is going to be criticized differently. It's just total. Everything is like just a mental battle all the time.
I have
But
a
then
question.
you're expected to perform at the same time. Go ahead. Question.
I know this is one thing. Because when I went through the process, I actually went through the process twice. Once down here, twice in Georgia, and once in St. Louis, Missouri. And I passed the 400 questionnaire. I passed the physical test once again, but I went through the oral board review.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you go through the oral board review, you know that when you're being bludgeoned with these questions with three officers. But I do understand through the process, and I don't know if this existed when you went in the industry, because I know things have changed dramatically. We talking 30 years, so I'm pretty sure a lot of things that they do today wasn't doing then. They have what they call, you correct me if I'm wrong, don't all officers, new incoming officers, have to pass a psychological evaluation test?
It depends. It kind of depends on the agency and the requirement for that particular agency. Some agencies, some offices, some state locals, they don't have no requirement for that. You can come in fresh off the block and become an agent with no psychological evaluations. That's why you have so many bad cops out there, because there is no psychological process.
And that's where I'm going with it. So how is that? Is that how there are so many white supremacists and racist white men and women on the force? Because there's no way you can tell me that they could pass a psychological exam, and those true colors not be prevalent or be found, especially in
Oh,
today's world when you have a lot of black law enforcement officers in positions where they're doing the questionnaire, they're doing the testing. How do they pass these psyche evaluations?
they do it. I mean, they do it all the time. They're good at what they do. It's like and first of all, let me say this. There is no such thing as a hiring panel where you're going to see a majority of black people on it. That's not going to happen.
Oh,
That's not going to happen. I've been on hiring panels as a supervisor, and I can tell you one of the things that my old supervisor, who was a black male, told me when I came in. He said, "I am assigning you to this hiring panel because with these new candidates for agents coming in, we need someone on the panel to represent our perspective." That's exactly what he told me verbatim. So I embraced that. And when I went on these hiring panels, I sit in rooms where we did interviewing for white candidates who sucked. And when I say sucked, they couldn't conjugate the verb to be. They couldn't answer the questions clearly or concisely, and they didn't have nowhere near the academic background as some of the black candidates that we interviewed. And I sit there in a room where it would be me and three other white people on the panel, and I watched them systemically and systematically downgrade the black candidates and upgrade the white candidates. And I would call them on it. I'd be like, hold on. I say, so you sitting here telling me you honestly believe that dude had a better interview than this dude? I'm saying, look at the qualifications, look at the grades, look at where, this and that. I'm like, how is it that this person, you are recommending this person for a job and not this person? And when you look at the statistics of what our minority recruitment was, we need this type of person working for us. This is the type of black agent we need, one with these qualifications, one with this ability. Not, we don't want you to go out here but what they would do was they would always want to hire the cute black chick. Always
mm.
want to hire the cute black chick.
You know,
Send her
white
down there
men
to
love
train.
black women.
Hey, bro. Hey, it's like, that slave mentality ain't gonna ever change. But they would, we'd hire them. They send them off to school, and they would not pass because they were not capable of doing the job. And then they would use those people who fail, but they wouldn't do that for a black male, but they would do it for the black female. And when they would fail, they would use that as the caveat for why they would say, oh, this is why we can't keep hiring all these black candidates, because they aren't qualified.
I know that also in the field of law enforcement, uh, and I remember specifically my oral board review back in St. Louis. The white officer asked me. He said, "If you was in the line of fire, if you was in the line of fire, and you was in a gun battle with criminals, and you knew that your coworker who was a white male was racist, would you still cover and protect him? And obviously, I'm like, yeah. What I'm asking you in the real world,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of how you feel about your white counterpart who's openly racist, or they can't hide it. He's racist.
Mm-hmm.
He don't like black people.
Yeah.
You still find it within yourself integrity that if you were in that type of battle in that fight, you still would have to cover him just because you both are pretty much. This is what's required of you as an officer. But did you always feel that if you were in the line of fire, you were in danger, and you were out there in the field, or they call for backup for officers that didn't care for people that look like you, did you ever feel like that they would not cover you in a situation of being in the line of fire?
No, I can't say I personally experienced that. Well, first of all, being one of the lead tactical instructors over the course of my career, I was the one responsible for instilling in the agents how they would perform in the field on enforcement actions. Everybody, it's like it's to me, it's no different than being a coach of a softball team. Hey, you got leadoff hitter, we got number 4 hitter, we got people at the bottom of the lineup. This is your job on the team. If you the home run hit on the team, I need your ass swinging away every damn time. Okay, so I would approach my day job just like I would softball. It's like, hey, you're the contact agent, you're the cover agent, you're the control agent. This is your role. It doesn't matter who's in that position. And we didn't just send them out there after sitting up in the classroom and telling them what they should do. We practice it. We made the roles interchangeable. Everybody had to be capable of being the contact agent. Everybody had to be capable of being the control agent. Everybody had to be capable of being the enforcement guy. Everybody had to be capable of knocking the door down with the ram. Everybody had to be capable of being able to use the long gun. Everybody had to be capable of, doing the defensive tactics techniques. Big, small
Wow.
didn't matter. Big, small didn't matter. White, black didn't matter. Male, female didn't matter. It's like these are the requirements for your job. You have to be able to do these things, and not only you have to do these things, you have to do them to an extent. Because we assessed everybody every year. We would train every quarter, and we would assess once a year. You have to prove to me that you are capable of doing these things, or guess what? We taking your gun. We taking your overtime pay that's built into your salary. We putting you on desk duty. So guess what? But see, that's the federal. That's the federal. A lot of times with the state and local, once they go through the academy, they ain't got no more requirements other than every once in a while they show up and they shoot.
Yeah.
That's why you see so many guys in law enforcement who are out of shape. Who, if they get into a confrontation and it's a matter of a gunfight or a fist fight, they're gonna always grab their gun first because they know they can't handle nobody physically. That'd be the issue. And then where the racism aspect of that comes in, when they're dealing with us in our community, they are intimidated by the presence of a black man. So
I
they
got
think to
I got a
themselves,
theory about
yeah,
that.
go ahead.
So two things I want to say before I get into that, because I want to ask you about something I see this real sinister going on here in Atlanta. For being the officer that you was and being a brother that you was, you're obligated to the duty. Did you put a target in your back at any point in your career? Did you feel like there was a target on your back because most of your white counterparts knew that you were for justice and what's right? Second of all, the second part of that question is, even though people have always talked about the blue code, is there an even deeper blue code amongst white officers within the same department as black officers?
Oh, no doubt. There's definitely a blue line. Like they call it the blue line for a reason. There's definitely a blue line. It's 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 always expected in circumstances where somebody messes up out there that you are going to make sure that they are taken care of. There are people in place, and this is why it's important for us as black people to be participants in these systems rather than saying I don't want to be part of that system and avoiding being part of that system. And it doesn't matter if it's the judicial system or the political system. This is why it's important for us to be part of those systems, because they can't do that if they have someone there that's going to hold them accountable. I mean, there's ethics, and then there's, okay, I got your back. You know what I'm saying? But for the most part, you have officers out there who want to do the right thing, but within these departments, they are pressured to turn the other cheek, or turn away and act like they didn't see what they see, or to say they saw something that they didn't see. You always see false information in reports. You always see, like I say, me as a frontline supervisor, as an assistant chief, as an active chief, I was the one responsible for reviewing these things. I was the one responsible for seeing these reports, for asking those questions. So you couldn't, I'm in place. So with my integrity, you're not going to sit in front of me and lie to me, because I'm also a tactical instructor. I also have experience as an agent. I also have done it myself. So you're not going to sit in front of me and lie about what happened out there, because I'm going to ask the relevant questions. When, what, why, where, and
Right.
when, and how did you do these things, and why did you do those things, and who was there with you, and what did they see, and what did they say? And that's the one thing they always taught me, and that's the one thing I always impart upon the people who I would train after the fact is, hey, you got to be able to articulate what happened. You can't just say you saw something. You got to be able to prove it. So
So what I think is sinister is when I was going through the stand of going out for law enforcement, and a lot of people, when I told them that, they was like, "You going out for law enforcement? You pro-black and all that?" When I tell people constantly, I'm not pro-black, but I know how people can perceive that. You know what I'm saying? But like, yeah,
but
but
what's wrong with that? What's wrong with that? What's wrong with being pro-black? There's nothing wrong with that.
nothing, nothing wrong with being pro-black. I mean, I say that to a certain context, based on the code.
Nah, I think it's that they consider you militant black. There's a difference. See,
Yeah,
see,
yeah, you got a
it
point.
ain't that you pro black. It's that you militant black. They feel like that
Hey,
you won't, they feel like that you would not want to. And I'm gonna say it straight up, bro. They
yeah,
saying to you that they don't think that you would function well in a system of white supremacy.
yeah. You know what? It's
Not,
funny you
not,
say
not.
that because
Mhm.
it's funny you say that because this is what happened, and this is like now we're going down the rabbit hole. This is what I'm here for. When I went to the PT, the physical training session, because I passed the background check as I always will. Now I was in DeKalb County. All right, this is a predominantly black county. I went to this class and I was the oldest person there. Now, out of all the people that they were seeing, there was an older white male who was overseeing the whole program. The other two
Mhm.
black officers there, they didn't have much pull like this guy. The minute I showed up, the minute he started to size me up. And what I got to thinking was, okay, this guy's in his 40s. Like, everybody's in their 20s, they're young, they're impressionable. This dude done lived life a little bit. He may not be as good in the academy. He may not be as easy to influence, blah, blah, blah. Every single activity did, from the push-ups, from the drill to jumping over a fence, the sit-ups. Man, do you know I beat everybody? My numbers were the highest in the class, but every time we had to do it as a group, he stood over me every single time. The young black officers were like, "Yo, man, damn, man, you move like a 20-year-old, like you're gonna be good for the job, blah blah blah." This dude came with negativity. And so after I finished the what they call a 440, where you got to get around the track one time and you have to finish it within your age range. I think for me it was 56 seconds, right?
Damn, that's
The
low.
people were there. They yeah, it's low, but at 47, like they kind of give you grace, right? Because when we did that, I was struggling, boy. Them young boys was going so fast. I'm like,
I
I'm at
was,
least
I
to make
was
my
for
cut.
that for that distance. I was that. Check this out. For that distance, Hours was 82 seconds for every age group.
That's easy.
You had exactly. You had 82 seconds.
Yeah, yeah. When I took it years ago in DeKalb County, I got around the track in 40 seconds. But man, at 47, I was like, I got around, but I was like 52. I was hurt. But anyway, the dude was negative as hell, right? And I'm like, you know what? I ain't with this bullshit. And I'm like, damn, I could just imagine if I got on with the department. It's a whole bunch of him. So to make your point, you're right, because I declined, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
The dude called me and was like, yeah, man, I called back to St. Louis. I checked your record. An assault and battery. I said, man, I don't have an assault and battery in my record. I said, my record is squeaky clean. So I don't know who you're talking about, and blase blah this. And so I said, you know what, man, just cancel my application. A couple weeks later, the sergeant called me. It's a black woman over him. She was like, hey, I just checked your numbers, and I was wondering what happened. Why didn't you pursue? I said, well, you have a gatekeeper in your company. When that woman told me about how great of an officer he was and racism ain't in that department and it's a lot of black people, I was truly done. And I'm telling this lady, you have a gatekeeper in your department. This is where I'm going with this. When I say there's something more sinister, one of the brothers I was talking to, when I was explaining to him about, my ambitions to get in law enforcement, he had a situation one time where he had a conversation with another black man at a Walmart. And he could have easily drawn his gun and eliminated the target, but what he did instead, with him having military experience, he just flat out whipped his ass.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when he got written up, and one of the supervisors told him, a white ranking officer told him, you would have been better killing him as opposed to whooping his ass. You wouldn't have gotten ridden up. But after he heard this, and it's a true story, he needed therapy. He was like, so what did you just want me to execute the man? And pretty much what the guy was saying, yes. So this is what I noticed about particular counties here in Atlanta, and this might be something going on in Houston. I noticed that like a guy like me who had good intentions, like when we first started the interview, you know, you wanted to fight crime, you want to make the community better, you want people to see you, be more visible for people that you can relate to and that you have an emotional attachments to. I started to realize that the same people that they were letting in all predominantly black counties were white males who come from the country, who are like 70, almost 100 miles outside the city limits of Atlanta. Why? Because if they get involved in a situation, they have no emotional attachment to the community. They wasn't raised black. So it's like, I don't look at him as a human. I look at him as an animal, which is why I asked the question I did earlier. Mm-hmm. Now, with that being said, and you just kind of like note what I'm saying. The last thing that I want to say is we always see predominantly white male officers killing unarmed black men. But what we hardly ever see and get off with the shit, and that we know administrative, investigative leave and things of that nature, and you can, you know, lay it all on the line. But what we hardly ever see is when a black officer must use that same force on a white male subject. It's a totally different standard. Do you want to speak to that reality? Am I crazy? Am I off, or am I on to something?
No, you're not. You're not crazy at all. There's lots of statistical data to support the fact that not just in law enforcement, but when black people commit certain types of offenses, or when black people engage in certain types of things, they are judged differently. And I mean, I've seen that shit from my own career. I saw what happens when I give you a perfect example. We had an agent who was pregnant, who, while en route home, stopped at an ATM in the company car. Okay. And they fired her for it.
She was a black woman?
Black woman. They fired her for it. This agent was a good agent, very productive, worked a bunch of cases, no problems whatsoever. All right. We had a white guy told the subject of one of our investigations that they were being looked at because they were his neighbor. He got a letter in his file. And like, this was on my watch. It was on my watch. I'm sitting here like, what are we doing here? I was like, this dude ain't getting no time off. We had a matter of fact, is that same damn white agent was selling old ammunition on the internet. Like, we switched from I think we switched from 9mm guns at some point to 40 caliber. He was a type. Yeah, he was a freaking firearms instructor, and he had a stockpile of 9mm ammo at his house, and he was selling it. He's selling the government ammo instead of turning it back. He was selling. Nothing happened to him. Nothing. Black agent stopped at an ATM on the way home. Got fired.
So when we highlight these things that we're talking about that are all factual, mm-hmm. I want to go into your struggles with PTSD. Mm-hmm. What is the root cause that really induces your PTSD into high levels, that just anger, anxiety? Just kind of give us an understanding of how that's affecting most black law enforcement officers behind the blue.
It's different for us as black officers, and I would say this is because of those factors that I talked about earlier, where not only are you dealing with the performance pressures of being a police officer, but you're also dealing with the perception of you as a black police officers from not only within the department itself, but from the community by which you serve. For me personally, I think it's just the culmination of trying to ignore the fact that, hey, I'm actually emotionally feeling these things, because I have a tendency to compartmentalize my traumas. And like, basically I just like, okay, I'm moving forward. I'm going to the next thing. I'm the person who creates more responsibility so that I don't have to think about the trauma. It's like, oh, well, you know what? Let me work harder. I got 2 cases in my inventory. Well, shit, let me open up 5 more. I'm going to be so busy, I ain't going to have time to think about it. And so what happens is, when I've been retired now for 8 years, so when you retire, the first few months you find yourself still in that mode where I got something I need to be doing all the time. I got to write a report. I got to be out in the field. I got to be, making phone calls. I got to be doing something investigative. I need to be training. I need to be doing something. And all of a sudden, you just got all this time where you don't have to do all of that. You're free. You ain't got to go to work. You ain't got to work no cases. You ain't got to go to court. You ain't got to testify. You ain't got to memorize nothing. You ain't got to look at no records. You ain't got to order nothing. You ain't got to talk to nobody. You got to interview nobody. You ain't got to travel. You ain't got to take down a load. You ain't got to count the money. You ain't got to take the money, to be counted. You ain't got to take the drugs to be inventoried. You ain't got to do none of these things. You don't have to be shot at. You don't have to shoot at people. You don't have to train nobody. All of a sudden, all of that went away. And I'm sitting there like, man, I got all this free time. What am I going to do with myself? All of a sudden, all those emotions that you had ignored all that time, that you had suppressed because basically you just kept yourself busy. Now, when you're in your moments of solitude and silence, when you're just sitting up not doing anything, shit, I didn't realize how much that really affected me. Or you start thinking about over time how you managed your emotions in a way that when you were dealing with people who you were in a marriage or a relationship with, or even dealing with family members, or how much you even missed in dealing with your family because you were always busy. All of a sudden, you just got time to sit there and you think about that stuff. So you don't have anything to push aside the emotions anymore. You can't keep yourself busy. You can only play so much softball. Like that. You only play so much softball. I try to do as much as I can, but there's only so much you can do. You start trying to fill your time with other stuff. And there really is, it's like a drug. There really is nothing else that fulfills what I did for 30 years. Like all of a sudden, I don't have that anymore. So all of a sudden, you find yourself wanting that. Like, it's like, if you're on crack, you get off. Now all of a sudden, man, I need some crack. So that in and of itself becomes an emotional thing that you have to deal with. It's like, okay, how do I deal with this now? How do I deal with the emotion of now when something happens? Shit, I can't just go to work and ignore it. I gotta think about it. And then your responsibilities in life change. The people who are in your life expect that they can have 100% access to you and make you feel bad. And that's another emotional thing too. People in your life make you feel bad about the choices in your life that led you to a point to where you could walk away from work at the age I walked away from work. They make you feel guilty about it. Well,
guilty
everybody,
about what? I mean,
say stuff like, well, everybody ain't like you. Everybody, some people got to go to work. Some people got to take care of it. They make you feel guilty about the fact, like you're benefiting from something for not doing anything.
I want you to go back to something you just said that I found so intriguing. You said that your family member friends, when you retire, they think they're supposed to forget all of you, and they'll never get all of you. What was you kind of saying about that?
They think that because because it's like while you were employed, you were always busy. You always had things going on, so they didn't have as much access to you as they would have liked to. And so now all of a sudden, when you have gotten to the point to where you're not doing all that anymore, your time is a little more available. Now they want all of your time. They want to take all your time away, where that time is supposed to be for you, where you are at your own peace, you're doing your own thing, you want to do what you want to do. Everybody wants to come in all of a sudden and pull on you and make you do all these other different things.
So let me ask you, what's wrong with that?
What's wrong with them wanting you to do it?
What's wrong? Like, if 30 years is a long time, you retired well accomplished. And you know what? When I hear you say that, I hear my father when he talked about my grandfather. My grandfather was a pastor. He was a legendary preacher, pastor, well known in St. Louis, Missouri. But my daddy told me that we never had our father growing up. Like, our father was always at church. He was always at the hospital. He was always at the jail cells. He was always in the street. And, he just felt like he just didn't always completely have his father. So I'm asking you that when you do retire, they're through the years, 30 years is a long time. And family have to compromise you as a public figure and people and a servant. So I asked that, is that the act? Why wouldn't, how can I put this? Why wouldn't you want people to have more of you once you do retire and you have the time to spend with them?
It's not a matter of you not wanting to give them access or spend time with them. It's a matter of, because of everything that you have done over the course of those years, you needing to be able to decompress and deal with yourself. And they aren't allowing you the ability to do that. It's like the one thing that is most detrimental to a person's mental health is when other people demand that you take care of them constantly and you aren't being taken care of in the same way. In other words, if you always the caretaker, if you always the breadwinner, if you always the one that makes sure everybody good, now all of a sudden you get a chance to kick back and kind of relax and kind of figure out what your next step is going to be. But then everybody else comes in and say, okay, well, you done with that now. So now you can do this for me and that for me and that for me. So basically you just replace one struggle with another. But
That's
on top of that,
interesting.
they use that as a source of guilt to kind of compel you to, once again, you taking care of other people. Nobody is reciprocating that on the other end. It's always about you not giving me enough. Give me more. Give me more. So that I'm telling you that it becomes. I mean, and you deal with that to a great degree on the job as a black agent. You always feel the pressure of you have to be better. You have to do more. As black people, we feel that anyway. Think about that. You have the pressure as a black man of knowing that I got to be smarter. I got to be more athletic if I'm playing sports. I have to be a better artist if I sing. If I'm an agent, I got to be a better agent. If I'm a police officer, I got to be a better police officer. Hell, if I'm a stock car driver, if I'm a golfer, I got to be a better golfer than the rest of these white guys in order to get the same opportunity they get for being less than. So you already have that burden on you throughout the course of your whole career. So when that pressure isn't there anymore, so now the pressure is being replaced with all these people who got all these expectations of you. And that's a different type of expectation because therein you are emotionally attached to those expectations. You ain't
So earlier
emotionally attached
we talked
necessarily
about it.
to it. Go ahead.
No, I'm saying so early in the show, as I was running down the history of blacks in law enforcement in the country, we talked about the organization Noble, which is the national organization black law enforcement. Uh,
Executives.
if I'm wrong, because I know I butchered it off air. What is their purpose, man? What is their play in equalizing this field for black men and women behind the
Um,
blue?
Noble is an organization. It's a support system, basically. Noble is an organization where black law enforcement officers, we commiserate with each other. We get together. We do training. We provide resources for counseling. They provide financial counseling. They provide legal counseling if you have issues on the job. We have have conferences where we do training, where we teach people how to do certain things. It's like how to write up um, your forms and stuff for promotions. It's just like it's basically it's us taking care of us because we don't get that from the global on the outside. It's basically a mentorship type thing, a global mentorship type thing.
For young people who are looking at going into law enforcement
Let me say this
in
right quick
30
before you say that.
years,
Let me say this right quick. Compare it to U-Trip and the BSC. That's what Noble is. Compare that.
that's a
U-Trip
good
and the
damn
BSC.
comparison.
Yeah. The BSC
That's a
is
good
there
comparison.
for
Yeah.
us, by us, to make sure that we get the opportunities that we would not have gotten on U-Trip. Because you go play U-Trip, you look at the teams, what is it? 90% black, 90% white. You got one or two blacks sprinkled in, maybe, on the whole conference. BSC,
No,
there
we don't
like
want to talk
I
about the conference. You know, I was
yeah,
suspended at
yeah,
one
yeah.
point.
But look, it's like I said, it's like I've said it many times. There's more diversity on the BSC than there is in U-Trip as a whole. Because on the BSC, every team got four others. Every single team.
Yeah.
You can't show me 10 black people on the conference unless it's an all-black team.
Yeah, that is very true.
Then that's my
That is
point. But
very
back to your
true.
question. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I just wanted to make that point.
Oh no, 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 man! Please have it. This is your time. Your show. Your speak. For people that's looking to get into law enforcement, I know quite a few. Some of the young brothers I hoop with at the gym, they now making their way into. I know in Georgia and certain municipalities, you got to start in the jailhouse first. You got to be a correctional officer, then they eventually
Yeah.
move you onto the street. in 30 years, and we talked about this constantly tonight, the constant changes, what would you tell them?
You
What
froze up.
preparation or things
Hey,
that
you
they need
froze
to
up. I didn't
take?
hear nothing you
Who,
just
me?
said.
I did. Oh, my bad.
Yeah, you froze up.
What would you tell young people? I'm still froze. I'm
No,
still
I can
froze,
hear you. Go
man.
ahead.
Okay.
No, I can hear you.
What
Go
would you
ahead.
tell? What would you tell young black men and women who are looking to go into law enforcement?
What I would tell them first and foremost is if you choose a service oriented industry, law enforcement, first responder, medical field, do it for the right reasons. Don't go into that because of the benefits that you might receive or the money that you might make. First and foremost, you need to have an altruistic spirit. You need to go in with the mindset that you're going in because you want to make a difference, you want to make a change. Now, those other benefits you're going to get anyway once you get in there. But if you go in only looking for benefit, financial or otherwise, then you're not going to have a fulfilling career because it's going to all be tedious and it's going to drive you crazy. You're not going to want to do it because there's so much shit that you deal with within the framework of the racial aspects of things and just the general societal things as the perception of being in law enforcement, that unless you walk in with the mindset that you are doing this because you really want to make a difference and you want to help people, then don't do it.
Wow.
That's the only thing that got me through 30
Wow.
years. I'm
That's
telling you, bro.
interesting, man.
Like I'm telling you, it's like when I started, bro, I wanted
That's
to be the Lone
interesting,
Ranger.
man. That's an interesting
I,
point.
I wanted to be the Lone Ranger. That's why I went into law enforcement. I didn't go into law enforcement because I wanted to make money. I didn't go into law enforcement because down the road I was going to retire early. I went in there thinking I want to make a difference in my community. I want to help people. I want to get these drugs out of my area.
And you basically them that if that's their mind, they need to change it.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. And I was kind of
But
told
yeah,
the same thing too because I was like, just like you.
hell, I told you. Hell, I
I
told
mean,
you
you
that.
went in young. I'm going in as a 40-year-old guy. Yeah, you
I
did. You
told you that.
did.
I told you
And
that. I
and I
say,
took
man.
heed to everybody did.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I say because I'm telling you, man, it's like
So
when I'm like as a Fed, when you go in, man, the money look damn good. The benefits are damn good when you got a government job. I ain't gonna lie to you. The benefits are good, but to last 30 years dealing with some of the shit you have to deal with in law enforcement, bruh, you got to have an altruistic spirit to deal with that. I'm telling you, you have to.
looking back over 30 years of your career, what are some of the things you would have done differently? Or
Mm.
the time that you wish, hey, I wish I could have did this differently. I wish I could go back and do that just differently in my career.
Um, I think I wish I would have taken advantage of the opportunity to be an executive or to continue on with managing because like when I got close to my eligibility for retirement, I had been in management for like 7 years at that point, and I decided that rather than continue on in management and potentially staying longer than my eligibility for retirement, that I was going to work my last 4 years and get the hell on up out of there. And that was primarily due to racial components that I was experiencing. And I
Speak
basically
on.
I got tired. I got tired of dealing with, for myself personally, I'm a high performer. I've always considered myself a high performer. Anybody who knows me on the job, anybody who knows me in life, anybody knows me, anything knows I work my ass off on everything. Nothing given to me. I work my ass off. I put in so many years and so many hours on the job. I did shit on the job that nobody else would have get done to get things done. I had the same partner for 15 years and we busted. My partner was a Hispanic guy. He was a damn right-wing Republican, believe it or not. I had a right-wing Republican as a partner for 15 years, and we busted our ass and we put a lot of people away in those 15 years. But that being said, I was dealing with situations where I was working and performing and producing twice as much as my white counterparts, and I wasn't receiving the same benefits. I wasn't receiving the same ratings in my evaluations. I wasn't
Yeah,
receiving
man.
the same awards. As a matter of fact, I was being downgraded,
I know
by I'm
I
being
got a
downgraded
homegirl,
by a
man, going through
person's.
that right now
Yeah,
in her industry
yeah.
where she.
Go
Oh no,
ahead.
I was just saying, man, like my homegirl's in the industry of mortgages, and she's going through the same thing. Like it's traumatizing. It led her to the point where it's very emotional. And I told her, I said, you know what, you perform at a high rate. You closing out deals, and I said they're targeting you. They're going to target, right, looking at you. And at first she was like, no, don't believe me. And then they kind of ran. And then come to find out, they came for her, pretty much forced her hand and asking her to take on another position because the one she in, if she declines, if she'll pretty much lose her job. And I see this happen around just society, period, when it comes to black people in industries and all nine areas of people activity. Um, do
Yeah, it's
you
not
plan
unique to
on to
law
continue
enforcement.
any type of activism?
I mean, I don't
I'm
think I
pretty
ever
sure it's
really
not.
stopped.
Do you plan on?
I, I never really stopped from the standpoint of
Do you?
activism. I think I'm kind of like outspoken on that one, but from like from a organized
Mhm.
standpoint, I do a lot of stuff behind the scenes that I don't promote because I just like I'm still in a phase where I'm trying not because what often happens to me when I get involved in things is that people want me to take on the leadership role, which becomes cumbersome
Mm-hmm.
for me because I am at a like bro, I'm 60 years old, man. I'm at a stage where I done lived way more years behind me than I got going forward. And I'm kind
Yeah.
of at a
You looking
stage
good,
based
man. You
on
looking good, young
yeah, I
man.
mean, but you know, but at the same time, man, it's like, you know, with some recent losses in my life, I'm kind of trying to reduce my level of responsibility and not allow people to like put me in the positions where I have to run shit or be a leader of it. That's like I'm kind of like, you know, pushing back on that a little bit because I always kind of step up and just take over. And I kind of like mentally, I need to just chill. I need to chill. I really do. I need to chill. I can tell because there's a lot of things now that I haven't like haven't focused on or dealt with some traumatic things from the job, some traumatic things from life. You know, just my overall
Wow.
story has been one of overcoming obstacles and always being told you couldn't and you can't and you're not good enough and yada yada yada. And I overcame all that shit. So now I kind of sit back and I say to myself, I'm kind of being introspective and reflective of where I am at this stage in my life and trying really hard not to rock the boat as far as where God has me right now mentally.
Yes.
And so I'm not trying to like add too much of a burden on myself in that regard. But yeah, as far as
That's
activism, I'm always
understood.
going to be outspoken. I'm always going to speak up. If I see an injustice, I'm going to be the first one to step in and say something.
Well, I know you
I'm
big on the
good.
politics. You know, I was
I'm
going to push the
I'm
show
good
back
with my
tonight so we
word.
can
I'm
catch a
good.
debate.
Yeah, I'm good with my words, bro. I mean, I don't, you know, it's like the reason why, and the reason one of the reasons why I told you, like, you know, we don't have to change because of the debate, because the bottom line is, as far as that debate goes and this election goes, man, everybody then pretty much decided who they're gonna support, who they're not gonna support. The difference in this election is gonna come down to whether black people are present or not. Are we gonna show up and save the country? Because if we don't show up, we ain't gonna. I mean, it's gonna go right back to the way it was. We got to show up.
Because
The
politics
only
much
the
affects.
go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. What's your point?
Okay, I mean, for example, like man, the reason why the dude got elected the first time was because 78% of black men didn't show up and vote.
Mm.
That's why he won by a freaking tenth of a damn point, percentage point. He won by like what? Shit, a couple of hundred thousand
Yeah, it was a couple
votes.
of hundred. Yeah.
Yeah, a couple 100,000 votes. Hell, he lost to Biden last time by like shit 2 million, 3 million votes, which tells you when we vote, we affect the difference. But you know, we got all this you know these
Well, well, well,
narratives
well,
out here.
well, let me ask you a politic thing because I know you remind me of my brother. Shout out to Will Beatty, man. He's very politically, scientifically inclined. And politics, it does affect law enforcement to a degree. I know you don't care for Trump, but how did you feel about when Trump he had an initiative? It was called something blue, and it was for like the police officers, kind of more power back to the police officers. How did you feel about that particular initiative that Trump was trying to push for police officers the last time he was in office?
um, Number one, I don't think it was his initiative. It wasn't his initiative. It was an initiative from the right who are basically trying to promote violence against our community. Um, the other part of that is policing needs to be changed. It's you know, it's like on the left side of the equation, we have a problem with how we put our messages out. You know, like that whole defund the police thing, that's a bad messaging. Some words have
Yeah.
connotatively negative meaning. It's like we don't want to take money away from police officers or not support the police. What we want to do is we want to retrain some of these officers in their way of thinking towards certain communities and get them back to realizing that they are there to serve the communities, not to basically cage us up like animals and treat us like we're animals and stuff. But there's another factor to that people don't take into consideration, and is that with policing, the old way of policing used to be the officers who patrolled communities used to come from that community. Like I said, when I was growing up, there was 15 police officers within 3 blocks of where I grew up, and all of us spent time in our neighborhoods patrolling growing up.
Yeah.
Me in a different level because I'm, federal. So I was like, I wasn't necessarily on the streets, but I was doing things within the neighborhood to rid the neighborhood of certain types of activities. Now what we have, and people used to go into law enforcement out of school, out of high school,
I remember
out of
that.
college.
Mm-hmm.
So what we have now is there's 2 ways to go into law enforcement now. You have to have college hours, college degree, or military service.
What happened to that certification that states used to offer before you went to the academy? They don't offer that anymore?
It just depends on, what agency or organization you were with. But what's happening now is a high degree of people who are in law enforcement are ex-military.
Right.
Let that sink in.
Especially in
Ex-military. So what you have is you have people who have been trained to be in combat, to be soldiers, to kill, and we are bringing them into these police departments. We are militarizing these police departments, and then we're turning those people loose on the communities that are impacted by them the most. The Black communities, the low-income communities.
Want to read this comment by Alexa, show's main supporter. All them girls, shout out to you. She said, "Shout out to Andre for staying the course, but also confirming why my son's away from law enforcement, military service. Salute to this brother."
Say it again. You kind of broke up just a little bit when you were saying it.
He had put up a count. I put it back up on the screen.
Oh, okay, I can read it. Okay.
Yeah, I think you said, shout out to Andre for staying the course, but also confirming why I steered my sons away from law enforcement and military service. Salute to
I hear you. Yeah, there's a lot of that way of thinking, and I get that because that's the current state of where we are. I mean, it goes back to what we learn now from the standpoint of our history with policing and with police departments and stuff like that. It goes all the way back to, the federal government had counterintelligence programs against the Black community where they use law enforcement, J. Edgar Hoover and the COINTEL, the Black Panthers, the LAPD, it's like, then you have the indoctrination of the Black community with rap music where it's for the most part anti-law enforcement, yada, yada. You have the political spectrum where if you go back to the beginning of the history of law enforcement, where law enforcement was initially created to be slave patrols. So
exactly.
when you know the history of it, you see what it was intended to be by the white supremacists, by the system of white supremacy, I will say. But what we also don't understand is we can't affect change in a system we don't participate in. There's no way we can. We are leaving ourselves. We're leaving ourselves at the mercy of the people who we are in combat with, and they got all the damn power. And it's like, if they have all the power, if there are none of us politically, think about this for a second. If you look at our political system, Republican and Democrat, if you look at the houses of Congress and you look at the Supreme Court and all of that, on the right, look at the amount of diversity you see on the right versus the left. Which one looks more like America?
The right.
The right don't look more like America. The other side. The right don't look more like America.
What do you mean by that?
The left realistically looks more like America does from a diversity standpoint.
As far as the melting pot.
the melting pot. What
As
the
far as America
country
becoming more darker and brown.
what the country was founded on was that America was supposed to be a melting pot of ideas that, notwithstanding everything else, was supposed to not be based on any form of religion. That's what the basic Constitution is supposed to be about. That's what America was founded on. The right basically wants a system where it's militaristic and it's fascist. Like basically, they want to be able to control all those segments of society that they had control of before everything changed.
Mm.
And they're rigging
You're
the
taking us
system.
back to the Jim Crow era.
And they rigging the system, bro. They rigging the system. They are creating a system where they are trying to take away all the rights that we have attained in the last 50 years. They're trying to systematically reverse those. They're trying to take away the right to vote. They're trying to, do suppression of the vote. And we falling right into it. And we're falling right into it a lot of times is because we're our worst enemy, is because we allow our voices to tell us that we can't get anything out of it if we participate in the system. Well, how in the fuck are we supposed to get anything if we don't?
Right. That's true. That's a powerful statement. But let me ask you this, man.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of winding it up.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you see the future of law enforcement going? Do we ever solve this problem of racism behind the badge? And
Nope.
I was watching it. Really?
Nope.
You don't think we could ever solve that problem?
You can't solve it. It can improve, but you can't solve it. And again, the way you improve it is by diversity and us participating in it. But again, racism, there's not so much the fact that everybody participating in the system are racist. The fact exists is that there is racism within the system. There's built-in systemic racism within every system. The issue becomes who steps up and becomes the leaders for the disenfranchised communities. I'm out the game.
My father.
I'm not, but I'm like, I'm out the game. I'm not in law enforcement anymore. I can speak my voice. I can give my experiences, but I am not an active participant within law enforcement. So there has to be people within law enforcement who want to step up and be chiefs and be mayors and be politicians who can speak the voice for the people who are disenfranchised. Now, we sit here and all we talk about is, oh, we ain't gonna participate because ain't nothing gonna change. No way. We stuck. Are we gonna go backwards?
Do you think technology could probably have a... I'm sorry, go ahead, brother.
Yeah, technology could, because there is a lot of misinformation out there, and black people don't read. Bottom line is, black people don't read, black people don't study. Black. If it ain't on a meme, we don't know what the hell it's about. It's got to be a meme. It's got to be if it ain't TikTok or a meme, we don't understand it. And there's so much, and we don't understand that that's how all these foreign powers that try to like disrupt our democracy, that's how they operate. They put shit out in the cyber world, and we sit up with our phones and we look at that shit all day long, and then we say, well, it's got to be right because it's on TikTok. I ain't never heard TikTok being, a basis for how somebody can create evidence like TikTok, because they said it on TikTok.
TikTok is something else. So the reason why I was asking you, like, where's law enforcement going and what technology and AI plays this role? I don't know if you've seen that series by Regina King. Now, there's two of them. It's called The Watchmen, right? You had the one I think was like animated, but when Regina King, I don't know if you've seen it. I forgot that actor. He's playing Miami Vice. Okay, so you remember in The Watchmen, they were living in a futuristic world where Officer Gun was locked, and it had to be approved. I think the state had a signal to it, then they can unlock the holster. Will we see a society where law enforcement correct a lot of the unnecessary killings and murders of black people by moving into a system of AI technology where it can read the temperament of the officer, where it can detect whether there's danger, can it censor a gun? They already got body cams, and we thought body cams was gonna solve the problem. They still killing people with body cams. What are we looking at, or have you seen anything coming down the pipeline that can improve law enforcement relationships between the black community and law enforcement?
First of all, we have to have a political system that allows change. And we don't have that because we have a political party that is in power who is very much anti-black.
And pro enforcement we have now?
No, not the administration. You're talking about the Congress, the lawmaking body.
Right, because he didn't have the House.
Exactly. I mean, you gotta, in order to accomplish anything, and the only time we have ever accomplished anything in this country, one party or another had all the bodies of government on its side. That's the only time we've ever accomplished anything in this country. I mean, go back to it. We wouldn't have had universal health care if we wouldn't have had all the bodies. And then what happens? As soon as we lose that power, they try to reverse it. That's the whole point. It's like, how do you maintain the power long enough in order to be able to make the change? And that's gonna involve an overhaul of the system that allow these people to sit in those chairs for 30, 40 years with all like the all that old school mentality that they have about how things are supposed to be.
Right.
I think we need term limits in Congress, but we need 10 years and get the hell on up out of there. You shouldn't be able to sit in that chair that much longer than a president can.
I agree with that, especially with all this young blood, and I've seen a lot of sisters on the forefront, man. And man, they on their head, man. And I admire a lot of these young brothers and sisters in the political realm who are really bringing it up to where things need to be and are serious about change. So, man, uh, the future. What does the
Mm-hmm.
future look like for Andre L. Barfield? How do you repurpose your life moving forward? What's on him? You know what I'm
um,
saying?
bro, my life,
Gonna
my
take
life
up
has purpose.
golfing?
Hey, nah, I ain't gonna golf. That shit expensive, but I got enough expensive hobbies. I got softball. That's the most expensive hobby I got.
Yeah.
But
Oh
I
yeah.
can tell you, for me, my purpose in life has always been what my father raised me to be, and that's to be a productive member of society. To always try to uplift my people, try to uplift the people in my life, the people around me, and to not go out my way to create harm. Like I said, I try to live my life by the good book, not talk about the book, but try to live my life by the book. As far as the greatest teaching that Jesus ever gave was one of love, is that you sacrifice and you give and you try to make people better than what you are, and you don't go out your way to harm people. And I guess the difficulty for me sometimes is that I find myself surrounded by people who don't share that same intellect or that same, you know.
You know what, man? Let me give you flowers, man. I gotta give you props. I remember when you had posted on Facebook a baseball field that was near and dear to your heart. It wasn't
Mm-hmm.
manicured. The grass had grew out of place and everything like that. And you
Are you
turned
talking about the
around,
high
man, and you
school?
cut the grass. The high
The high
school,
school.
man. I
Uh-huh.
gotta commend you for that, man. People in our community just don't think like that no more. We don't understand the importance of our surroundings, our community. My girl Erica Johnson, shout out to her. She just became the newly head coach of Newton County softball. I used to take my daughter. We used to go to her games. Sometimes she would train and deal with Peaches early in her little teeny weeny softball career. But she would always
Mm-hmm.
talk about, why would the school let the field go down like this? Why they don't cut the grass? And a lot of times she would go out there and herself. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that was commendable of you, because you don't really have no attachment. It's not like you coach there, you have a child there. And I just think a lot of people, because I just want to give
Got
you
no
yours,
kids. Got
because
no kids in the game,
right,
bro. No
right,
kids in the game.
right. But people, a lot of people talk, but not people not in the community. You're in the community, and like, even though you don't have kids of your own, what you did for that man is great for those children.
Mm-hmm.
And I commend you for that, man, because lost culture in our community as far as the upkeep, and it's just maintaining what we have. Shout out to you. Let me give you, man. You
Yeah,
and
I
I've highly always
man.
admired, man.
What I will say about that, because it's like I didn't do it for flies. I didn't do it for recognition. But my thing
I
was
know.
that you know baseball and sports gave me opportunities in life that I never would have had otherwise. It taught me things that I
Mhm.
never would have been taught otherwise.
Mhm.
I fell in love with the game at a young age. If not for
Yes.
baseball, I could be one of those people who've been locked up for 30 years instead of did what I did for 30 years.
Yeah.
So it gave me an opportunity not only to meet some great people, to have some association with some great people, but I had a lot of great memories of playing. And it has basically been the one constant thing in my entire life that has kept me mentally stable. So
Man,
for
that's what's
me,
up, man.
so for me, knowing the challenges of the area that I grew up in, because it is far more challenging to grow up as a young man out there than it was when I was growing up. I grew up with both parents. You know what I'm saying? I grew up in a it takes a village type neighborhood where everybody stepped up for the kids in the neighborhood, where my house was the community house. You know,
Yeah.
if you didn't have food to eat in your house, you could eat at my house. And these kids don't have that anymore in that area. So for me to we always talking about why black people don't play baseball no more, why black kids don't play baseball no more. That's one of the reasons why. Is because nobody invests in them for that. You know, they only invest in them for certain things. And we can if we can be entertainers, or we can, do things, football, basketball, entertainment, rapping, singing, all that stuff, we support it fully. But when it comes to something like baseball, and baseball is the epitome of what our struggle has represented, going all the way back to, again, we're going to take it back full circle, back to the Negro Leagues, back to Jackie Robinson, all that those people went through so that we would have the ability to play the American game. And then here we are, 2024, and I go out in my old neighborhood and they playing on a field that's just horrible. I couldn't just see that and not do something.
Man, I appreciate you, man. You cook, man. I definitely want to do this again because I don't think we can encompass everything that needs to be talked about in one show. And plus, there will come up a situation where, it will require your expertise on it.
Yeah.
People.
Yeah, I'd like to,
man,
like
people
at some point, I'd like to do a forum where I can at least take some questions, see what the audience thinks and stuff like that.
And
like I said, I
we
can't
can
see
rock it
comments and
out.
stuff. Yeah.
We can't see the comments.
No, I can't see nothing.
I know. I thought. Oh, I didn't know that. Well, the crazy thing about it is we've had a consistent 8 viewers, but there's actually probably more people watching because this is only showing what Facebook has got. It's not showing YouTube. It's not showing.
Gotcha.
It's funny because when I first started podcasting, the management team, like they say, never stream on Facebook. Do YouTube give you the numbers, traffic all the views to one space. So a lot of times, what I've noticed in the past, when I come off a show, it wasn't that many people. But then when I go back and look at the views and the actual plays, it's like 300. I'm like, okay, people were watching. So this is definitely do again. I think you deserve and most are qualified to have a forum to take, man. Like I said, you were the very few people that when I first started podcasting, I had to get you on this show. I threw it at Rose. We know Rose is still in the field. Shout out to Rose. Shout out to BK, my teammate from A's the league link tonight. My cousins back in St. Louis, Heather, everybody that was on the force, friends and people down here in Atlanta, Georgia. And I just want people to understand that because a black person is behind the badge does not make them a coon. It does not make them a sellout. Actually, that makes them more critical to our community. Because we have people that do not look like us that will execute us in a minute because they don't have the value for us like we can for each other. Man, do you have any parting words, man, before we get on up out of here, man?
Yeah, man. Last thing I'll say about being black in law enforcement is that a lot of times you can't accomplish anything through normal methods. You definitely have to be in the positions of power in order to affect the change within the communities that we serve, as well as within the departments. If we aren't represented in leadership, then nothing's going to change, because those sects within law enforcement that are all full-fledged white supremacists as members, that's always going to be there. That's always going to be there. I mean, I try to tell people, look at it like this. As many militant black people as we have in this world, you got just as many white supremacists in this world. So the way you combat one is different. It's like they want to be outwardly racist. We have to be smart about how we infiltrate.
Sound like you need to write a book, brother.
Oh man, I've heard that before. I never heard that before.
You need to write a book, man. You need to write a book. I would definitely purchase it, man. You articulate so goddamn, man. I appreciate you.
All right, bro.
I'm blessed to have you come on this platform, but this definitely ain't the last time. I'm thinking, man, while we doing this show, man, I'm like, yo, man, I could do a really lead and with just you, Coach Ramik, so people can see it from a different. That's actually did this walk.
Panel discussion.
I know what, to be honest with you, man, I have an idea to do it in Atlanta. I have a spot here that I can rent out. They give me a real player price for it, but I really want to organize that because that's gonna be. I'm gonna have an actual media team there, promote it. It's gonna be a live audience because something that's so needed, man. This is just gonna be a forum amongst black men, and if I can set that up, and if I can get people behind me to invest, you will get a plane ticket. You get a hotel room. My door is always open. I gotta get some of the greatest brothers, man, in one room to have that conversation and to talk about a plethora of things in the space. Highly intelligent brothers, man, because it's needed. Because like I uploaded the episode this morning, men like you, men like Ramik, men like Mike Tillery, men like my father, men like Calvin Heath, the owner of Showtime Men's Basketball League. Just great black men are just invisible. We don't have a voice. People don't see us. They don't recognize us. And all the brothers who doing good things in their community, man, we need to be highlighted. Rob Love with Guerrilla Republic, my man Melafear. So I'm just running off some names, man, that's coming to the top. Great men who I highly admire.
Because people only want to pay attention to the brothers with clout and money.
Exactly. The clowns.
The clowns.
Well, until next time, man, we thank everybody for sitting in. Thank you to Brother Andre L. Barfield, man. You gave us a plethora of insight and perspective, man, and hopefully people walk away. And usual, man, I always get, as soon as we go off air, I always get the text messages. Great show. More information. I promise you this back again, man. But again, man, I thank you so much, man, for time. I don't take it for granted. I know you probably would have been somewhere playing ball, man, but we're going to do this again.
Oh, not tonight. This is my day off.
It's your day off?
My day off. Hey, man, men's mental health month, bro. It's like I'm on a mission. It's like when I'm a mental health advocate, and I try to be transparent so that people can see that, it's like when you're sitting around and you're thinking that people are so strong and yada, yada, yada. Even strong people have challenges mentally. We all do.
Yeah. But Scorpios, we still the best.
Hey, shit. Hey, you want? Hey, I'm telling you right now, you want real love? Get your Scorpio man.
I know that's right. Scorpio man always top tier.
They can't handle it, bro. They can't handle it. They can't handle the loyalty. They can't handle the loyalty.
Nah,
we got standards.
Man. They can't.
We got expectations and we got standards. They don't like that shit. They still want to. They want to navigate in the world like they single, and they ain't.
Hold on, man. Let me get out of here before we get out of here. Oh, yeah. Appreciate you, Lexi. Lexi said, great show. Appreciate you. And appreciate everybody for us. Can you see the comment, man?
I saw that.
You probably have to check it and see when we get off. Look, I'm getting text messages already. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Appreciate the
love.
Right,
bro.
Listen,
all right, man.
We're going to run it back. Like I always say, man, the biggest mistake you can make in life. Yo.
I know. I'm probably going to get like 2,000 damn Facebook requests now.
Hey, that's what it's all about. Hey, man, but you necessary. I tell people you are necessary, brother. Your voice is necessary. Your wisdom.
Yeah, but you know what? And I will end on this, bro. It's not about me. It's about the collective. It's about the impact that you have. As I tell everybody, it's like it ain't about me. That's a selfish way of looking at it. It's about the impact. It's like, hey, just like softball. It ain't about me. It's about the team. I don't give a damn if I bat 300 and we win. Some people only care if they bat 700 and lose. I only care about the wins and the losses. I know them all.
I know that's right. I know you coach stand play.
I know them all. All right, bro. Be good.
Down in the building. All right, man. The biggest mistake you can make is that you have time. I value. I love next episode. Peace.
Yes, sir. All right.
My God.